Welcome back. Today we are going to discuss 3D printing, or it is also called additive manufacturing, and how this is important for the new age of industries, and how specifically I think in defense, in medical, in automotive industries. Automotive means basically car manufacturing and all these things. That's, I think, it's one of the example in all this industry, and maybe in other industries also. 3D printing or additive manufacturing is a concept that is very much is a hot topic, and we'll try to understand. And before start, we might you might had seen 3D printing machine, very small prototype in maybe in in TikTok or maybe in YouTube short and all this thing. And but and you might think that these are just a tool. I mean, of course, many of you know it much better way, but many of us may not know that, or may think that these are actually as a just a hobby tool or something like that. It's not actually. It has a huge impact and going to have a huge impact, and actually creating an impact on the various industries. And to start with, I'll just give a glimpse what is 3D printing or what is additive manufacturing, and why it is how it is different from the traditional manufacturing, which also can be called as subtractive manufacturing, where any part of any product basically are in traditional manufacturing. It will be basically, there will be machine for drilling, or and so basically you have a bigger substance of certain material and you cut through, and then you polish and all these things. That's very simple definition of traditional manufacturing, and there are a lot of technologies used there. Yeah. And in context to that, additive manufacturing or 3D printing is basically, it's called additive because it actually doesn't have to be drilled or cut through. It will just use some optimum amount of material, and then it will, in the computer, you will just insert the design, and then it will basically form the 3D model, sorry, not model, actual the substance or product or part of the product that you are making. In layer by layer it will form it. So here you can see that it's not like subtracting from a whole chunk, but rather it's actually additive, like you add layer after layer. That's why it is called additive manufacturing. And yeah, so that's it. Let's start. Before we dive into the details, so let's have an overview of what is additive manufacturing or 3D printing. Yeah, so the typical process of any additive manufacturing will be, or 3D printing, through 3D printing process will be, first the engineer have to design it on a CAD software. The 3D model has to be there, and then that will produce a STL file. So we know what is STL file. I mean, a lot of us who work in designing aspect, mechanical engineers, they must know that. And also in my field also, we deal with STL file, where we basically design the geometry of, let's say, certain collimator or certain detractor in the STL file, and then that can be fed into the simulation software where we do simulation. So I mean, we are not talking about manufacturing here, but I'm just using as a, I mean, I had a relevance. I know what is CAD and all this thing, but the typical process of any 3D printing process is CAD, and then it will produce STL file, and then you import that STL file into your software for the 3D printer, and then that will produce your object in layer by layer. And then in generally you need to have an end processing, where you need to polish the surface to some extent, and actually yeah, and then depending on the material, the polishing technique can be different and all these things. So, and it's still in the process of the technology still is developing. So yeah, and now, yeah, so I will just mention here that one might think that the 3D printing and all this thing is just for making a toy or something like that. No, that material, we might have a notion that, you know, it is just a plastic that we are using for 3D printing. No, it can be any I mean, in generally it mostly it's plastic, ceramic, but it can be also material also. And maybe, as you can see, in the material case, it can be, I mean, the polishing technique can be different and all these things. So it's still in the process of development, but you might I mean, and that's why, I mean, I'm mentioning that, you know, it can be iron and all this thing, and that's why it is becoming very important. Even making, you know, in car industry also, they can make the prototype very fast. uh, yeah, and yeah, so you can see here the steps here, and yeah, so that's it. Here we can see different kind of material, from the gear parts to maybe pipes, and then of course material component of, let's say, some engine, and yeah, and a lot of other electronics parts, that these all can be built with this technology. And one might think that these are for plastic and all this thing that I'm mentioning, but it can be very hard metal also. And I think with time people will come up with different segment or different technologies within the domain of 3D printing, where one can use different sort of material, and that will lead to very I mean, maybe very hard uh, component of the system can also be very heavy, and all this thing can also be built. I believe that. I'm not an expert, but that's what I think it will happen with time. And that's why we should all be focused about it, and how things are changing. And yeah, and yeah. Now, if we see the how the history had progressed, I mean, what is the history of 3D printing or additive manufacturing? It starts with the invention of a device called stereolithography, and it was invented in 1983 by Charles Hull. And then straight away within 3 years he had found a company called 3D System Inc. And that company first commercialized AM technology, that means 3D printer with the stereolithography technique. And then after that, in 1990, some had invented other type of 3D printer, which is based on selective laser sintering, and that was also part of the process that was needed for the development of 3D printer and, yeah, its commercial adoption, you know, in the industries. So here we can see a figure where we can see 19 first phase is basically first AIM systems, stereolithography SLA system developed by 3D System company in 1983, and then printer based on new technology introduced from 1990s to 1995, and then in 1995 to 2000 roughly low cost AIM systems developed around the world, Japan, United States and Germany. And then finally technology advances lead to increasing adoption in automotive, aerospace and medical industry. So these are mainly three industries where you can see the most of the use. Yeah, and as far as now, that is the machine part, and now the raw material that goes into, that's the material that also need to have a gradual development, one need to have different sort of material, different variety of material should be introduced, so that one can think of doing different producing different product out of it. Not exactly the full product, but the part of it. Like, if we are in the automotive industry, then we need to have iron as a material, so that let's say the outer casing of a car can be built very fast and with a very efficient way. Like, one can just, the engineer, mechanical engineer or the design engineer can just import this design, and then all of a sudden within maybe 1 or 2 year, sorry, not 2 year, 2 hour, it is done. Actually, with respect to other traditional method, it will be just it will go through maybe, so they will import some they will use the imported raw, maybe a thin sheet, and then maybe it will go through certain machining, different sort of machining. I'm not a mechanical engineer, but you can understand that. So you can feel that how this is important, how it is becoming very how it is becoming very important, because specifically in specific industries like automotive and medical industry, basically these are used, 3D printers are used to print various prosthetic material and various other tools also. So as far as material development is concerned, first generation acrylate resins commercialized by 3D System and Chiba Geigy, and from 1990 to 2000 a new resin developed and commercialized for use in wide range of 3D printer material. And then after 2000, materials developed to withstand tougher condition, focus on developing capability to process newer material, for example composites and metals. That is important, metals. So so that is the roughly a simple history of the additive manufacturing or the 3D printing. Now let's come to advantage and disadvantage of additive and traditional manufacturing versus traditional manufacturing. So the first thing to notice is that for additive manufacturing, that means when you are using a 3D printer, so you can address the design complexity problem in a better way. For example, you are making a collimator, then of course not all the collimators are made of 3D printer, but in a lot of collimators, of course, the material itself is a problem then, but anyway, so let's forget about this example, because it is a niche example here. But what I'm trying to say is that if your component is very complex in design, then machining and getting that correct 3D shape can be very difficult. Then you need to subtract that shape into small pieces. But then in case of 3D printing, you can just do it in one shot, because it's on layer after layer. Then of course the question may be that how the refining, the after printing, how the polishing and all this thing will work. So that will depend on I'm not really don't know how that part is important, but I think if technology improves, then that part also improves. Speed to the market. AM system can manufacture products with little or no tooling, saving time during product design and development and enabling on-demand manufacturing. Waste reduction. AM typically uses less extraneous material when manufacturing component, thus significantly reducing or eliminating scrap and waste during production. This makes AM a more efficient process. So that you can see that how waste reduction, that's the obvious thing. Now it's not like all good for 3D printing or additive manufacturing. There are goods various ages in traditional manufacturing. Specifically, traditional manufacturing is well suited for high volume production, where fixed tooling and setup cost can be amortized over a larger number of units. additive manufacturing is generally more competitive for low to medium volume production run. Yeah, so that can be argued, but anyway, so I'm not really an expert on this thing, but one can understand that, and it may depend on the improvement of the 3D technology, 3D printing technology. It might change actually. Choice of material. Traditional manufacturing technique can deploy to a wide variety of material, and that's very much true, while additive manufacturing predominantly uses a narrower range of polymer, metal, ceramic, and composite. So that's very much is important. And I think, for example, I can give you an example that we worked on SPECT system, that means a scanner that is used for preclinical imaging, that means to image the rat and mice and various small animals, so that drug development can happen. And there you need very high resolution imaging, and we used collimator, and those collimators basically it's a high energy imaging, so that means those collimator material has to be very dense and all this, and so we use tungsten and all this, which is very heavy. So I believe that using tungsten will not work in 3D printing, and I think they are not using additive manufacturing, so it's basically traditional manufacturing. So one can, I can give this example for sure, that it's not all easy for 3D printing, that you can build everything, because specifically a 3D because specifically collimator is very complex in 3D design. So that's the good and bad. And certainly workflow streamlining is possible, very much doable. Is you can do it in much better way in additive manufacturing, and flexible design and product customization can be done in additive manufacturing, which is not possible in traditional way. So these are the advantage, disadvantage, and I think with time technology will change, and people will see more solution in the more material choices in 3D printing. So I think it will work in future. Now let's go into little bit inside let's discuss this thing in more detail. So as we know that the material are limited, the used material in 3D printing are limited, and mostly those are plastic metals, some kind of metal, ceramics, and composites. And now there are various way to categorize 3D printing technologies. One can be based on material, one can be based on the instrument or the mechanical or physical process that is used. Yeah, so on that front we can say there are processes like wet photopolymerization, then material jetting, material extrusion, power bed fusion, binder jetting. So yeah, I'm not going to go into the detail of it, so you can read it from the document. So I will give the link of the document from where I'm making this video in the end of the video, so you can read it if you want. So these are more into the engineering aspect of things, and I am not from that my domain is not here, so I will not go into the explaining every bit of it. So yeah, similarly sheet lamination, direct energy deposition. So in sheet lamination, thin sheets of material, for example plastic or metal, are bonded together using a variety of methods, for example glue, ultrasonic welding, in order to form an object. Each new sheet of material is placed over previous layer. A layer of or a laser or knife is used to cut a border around the desired part, and unneeded material is removed. This process is repeated until the part is completed. Yeah, so that's the sheet lamination. And directed energy deposition. In directed energy deposition, focused thermal energy is used to fuse typically metal material as it is being deposited. Directed energy deposition systems may employ either wire-based or powder-based approaches. Now, from the technology point of view, or I will say the instrumentation point of view, one can divide the 3D printers into various categories, and in each category there is a specific option of what materials one can use and what processes one can follow, and then disadvantage and advantage of each technology can also be understood. So in case of stereo lithography, it is the additive manufacturing process will be VAT polymerization that we discussed in the just a few minutes ago, and the material will be liquid photopolymer or composites. Advantages are complex geometries, detailed parts, smooth finish. Disadvantage is post curing requires support structures. So we can see the disadvantages can be something that you need to look forward, and I think in case of digital light processing, again it's VAT polymerization is the aim process, and the material is liquid photopolymer. Advantages allow concurrent production, complex shapes and sizes, high precision. Disadvantage is limited product thickness, limited range of material. Multi-jet modeling, for example, AIM processes material jetting, typical material photopolymer wax, good accuracy and surface finish, may use multiple material. Disadvantage is the range of wax-like material is limited, relatively slow build processes. Similarly, there are various other technologies, and each have their own aim process to be that you can use, and of course the material choice, and then of course advantage, disadvantage. So what I will say here without further stretching this thing is that each technology has their own advantage and disadvantage, and in what happens in technology development or in applied science, what I understood in my research experience till now, I am doing research in PhD and now postdoc, so it's been like almost 8-9 years. So what I understood is that, and by no stretch I'm a good researcher as such, but whatever little bit I understood is that depending on the physics and the law, not exactly the law but rather the various material used or various geometries that one can really have, so there is a limit on what you can really achieve. And in fact, in a lot of analytical approaches in research, there are effort to basically first establish what is the theoretical limit, and then of course people go into doing certain instrumentation and whatever the other component needed for the instrumentation, and that also brings some limitation, and then finally you'll have something which is, let's say, more than, or not more but less than the theoretical limit what you can achieve. So what I understood is that as an applied scientist you need to basically respect various not respect is a very misleading word maybe, but you need to understand what are the limitation of various material in a fundamental sense, and various geometry or various other aspect, and what happens in that context is that things become, in when you go to the application, then things become more diverse in a sense that, what I mean by diverseness here is that in certain applications certain technology or same technology with certain variation will work, and in other application other technology with different kind of variation will work. So it becomes more of a personalized solution to every problem, rather than having that there is something universal solution to every aspect of the problem. So that's my understanding of applied science, and that I strongly believe is the truth. Now the same table repeated here. So but here you can see that the each technology, there is no thing like universal technology that can be used in all the materials. So I think only for selective laser sintering, but there also you will find, when you go in the detail, they will find that certain material has certain disadvantage in this technology and all these things. So again the same message comes that there is no general solution to everything. So there is a diverse personalized solution can be achieved with certain accuracy, certain uh, efficiency, and all this thing. More interesting stuff. So here you will see what are the sectors which are in which the predominantly additive manufacturing are making penetration, and then what are the current application, and as well as what are the future outcomes. And of course, by no means these are the only industries we have in the planet Earth, but certainly we can see that these are more it had already penetrated in various wholesome industries: healthcare, automotive, consumer product and retail, space, commercial, aerospace and defense. Those are very uh, high revenue industries. So let's start with commercial, aerospace and defense. And these are to some extent I think scary also, because now you can see that the defense and all this thing, how it can be manufactured with low cost and all this thing, and how, I mean, the things get shifted, who knows. So anyway, so the concept modeling and prototyping, these are certainly the current application, and structural and non-structural production part, low volume replacement parts. Now what are the future potential application one can see? Embedding additively manufactured electronics directly on parts, complex engine parts, aircraft wing components, other structural aircraft component. Yeah, so I'm not really into those things, and I think the uh, aerospace industry is very complex and very high-end industry, lot of sophisticated engineering. So I'm no way an expert on this thing, so I'm not going to comment that, but just I'm reading here. And in space, specialized parts for space exploration, structures using lightweight strength materials. So I talked about this, and I think I saw a video of a startup in Bangalore. They are showing that the outer casing of the rocket, they are using some very light material, but at the same time very hard, high strength actually. So that's the one example, and I'm very much sure those are made of through additive manufacturing. Now what are the future application? On demand parts, spares in space, large structures directly created in space, thus circumventing launch vehicle size limitation. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Now in automotive industry, the current applications are rapid prototyping and manufacturing of end-use auto parts and assemblies for antique cars and race cars, quick production of parts or entire. What are the future applications? Sophisticated auto component design through crowdsourcing. Yeah, that's interesting. I know for sure there are a lot of passionate people who will be very interested into that. Now in healthcare, this is something I'll be very interested. Yeah, as I said, prosthetic implants, these are the main things that are actually produced with lot of using additive manufacturing with lot of quantity. not in all throughout the world, but certainly in many countries they do use additive manufacturing because it's very easy, and because as you can see, prosthetics, prosthesis and implants, these are not very complex in structure. So yeah, so medical instruments and models, hearing aids and dental implants, so these are basic things. And future will be interesting, developing organs for transplants. Yeah, so that's will be interesting. And tissue engineering, and these fields had really gone into, I mean, progress a lot. So it is possible large scale pharmaceutical production. Yeah, that's also, now we know that in pharmaceutical they use robots and all these things, but yeah, that will be interesting to see how additive manufacturing can impact that sector. So developing human tissue for regenerative therapies. Yeah, so that I think, yeah, there will be some ethical issue there, but I think eventually people will forget about ethics. I mean, not every bit of thing, but there will be certain aspect where they will reduce the burden of ethics. And I mean, sorry for the choice of word, but um, I mean, they will just be more lenient and let things happen, because in agriculture also, I mean, things are happening. So yeah, I'm not really uh, I think that this will happen. And in consumer products and retail, rapid prototyping, creating and testing design iterations, customized jewelry and watches. Yeah, that's interesting. And limited product customization. In future, co-designing and creating with customers, customize living spaces, growing mass customization of consumer products. So that's basically the current as well as future application, potential application in these sectors. Finally, so had been a lot of hope, or lot of exuberance, let's say, or lot of hype about lot of technology. Like in our college days, we heard about nanotechnology and how it will going to change the future and all this thing. But now we see that, yeah, there are a lot of application, but then it, the thing that was talked about or hoped in those days, let's say 20 years ago or maybe 15 years ago, not been realized with its 100% potential, let's just say. So, and now also we see with AI, and I think it will change, a lot of things will change, let's say upcoming 10 or after 20 or 10 years. But in these cases, the media and society sometimes overestimates things. So same thing happen, maybe true for the additive manufacturing or 3D printing here. And so there are opportunities and there are challenges. And I think the conventional manufacturing or the subtract manufacturing or the manufacturing with drilling and all this thing will not go away. And in reality, I will say that in certain industries the additive manufacturing will play a disruptive role, but it will not going to replace the traditional manufacturing in a full way. And there are specific reasons for that. And let's just start with the challenges here. That first thing is exuberance versus natural evolution and true potential of the technology. Now, it is very important to understand that exuberance here means that there is hype into certain thing, and then people started adopting that, but then with time they realize that it is not that profitable, or not that not producing that kind of a result that they are wanting. So each technology has its potential, and every technology needs a natural evolution. Natural here means that the proper amount of funding and then research with enough time and then with a certain then people will understand a lot of gain a lot of knowledge, and then they will understand that what directions to take, I will say, what avenues and how the technology should develop. And in most probably and in generally in all the cases, when new technology comes, then it doesn't replace the old technology in its entirety, but then most of the time, if it is sometimes very disruptive, then it can change the picture in a broad way. But then in most of the cases, what happens is that the old technology effectiveness of that remains in some domain, and in some applications, some industries, the new technology takes hold of it or replaces the old form of the doing the certain thing. So in that case, apart from, I mean, being exuberant about it, one needs to take time and needs enough funding to realize the natural evolution of the technology or set of technology under the additive manufacturing fold. Now, ethical consideration is important. I said that basically in defense there will be a lot of application, and then the question is whether you want to create guns out of additive manufacturing. That's a big question, and there should, I believe personally, that there should be it should not happen, because then you'll have a situation where everyone will be can buy something and then print a gun out of it. So, and then who knows, the bullets are also be printed, I mean, not with the same potential or same power as the real or the conventional one, but maybe very harmful. So a lot of regulations will be needed, and bioprinting of human cell, that's also an ethical consideration. And yeah, I don't have any opinion about that. Intellectual property and privacy issue, yeah, I don't know what that mean here in this context. um, Regulatory uncertainty in different countries. Okay, and limited choice of material, yeah, that's a big challenge, and I think that will going to remain. And materials and process manufacturing qualification and certification standard, yeah, okay, and small production runs and scalability limitation, yeah, scalability is, I think, is a big thing. And mind you that uh, if you want to replace your, in, let's just say, take a small simple example, that if you have a factory and you are making a product or from some component, and you basically make component from the traditional manufacturing process like drilling and etc., and now you want to replace with the 3D manufacturing and all this thing, or 3D printing, sorry. Now the scalability is a big, first of all, you need to understand that what is the cost of buying that instrument and replacing it, and then whether that cost with a sufficient amount of time will going to take care of your new earnings. That means the I mean, making the same product, whether if it is a cost effective, whether it really takes care of the whole price and all this, and how much it takes time. So that's a big question. And in general, right now with the current technology, which is still in process of development, I mean, um, it is actually the price will be a big factor, I will say. Maybe not in all cases. For example, in medical devices, there are, I saw a lot of cases where they talk about additive manufacturing, making a lot of small medical instruments, like scissors or maybe something like that, a lot of things. Now in terms of opportunity, there are a lot of good takeaway, and one is of course unprecedented design flexibility and allowing customization and new product development. So in certain segments in this industry, one can have this flexibility of, the engineers can just change the design in the computer and then feed it to the machine, and then all of a sudden you have a new product for as a prototype, not for a full-fledged product. And that R&D thing should be, I mean, in that segment, the additive manufacturing or the 3D printing system should be integrated. I mean, again, not for all the industries, and not may not be possible. For example, I can give you an example that we work in SPECT, that means a instrument used for small animal imaging, and there we need a collimator, and those are basically material is tungsten, and I believe I'm not sure, but most probably there is no 3D printer which will use the tungsten as a material, because it's very hard, very heavy, and then I don't know, I think melting point is very high, so I'm not really sure about that. And I know for a fact, as a practical fact, that the collimators that we use in our experiment are actually not manufactured from a 3D printer. Actually, it's I mean, manufactured in a traditional way. So yes, in that case, of course, the customer using a 3D printer will not work actually, and we'll have to rely on additive manufacturing. But just imagine that if the 3D manufacturing works there, then we can just have a 3D printer in our lab, and then all of a sudden we can do a lot of R&D, because one thing is about doing simulation, but then you will have to validate with the experiment. And then that takes time, because if you use the traditional manufacturing process, then you have to order it, and then that takes a lot of time as well as a lot of money, because it will go to some factory and they will see, and depending on the design it can be very complex. And in case of 3D printer, the complexity is an opportunity, I mean advantage, because more complexities, it doesn't matter actually, can draw on model anything actually. Novel end market application in areas such as regenerative medicine. Yeah, that I don't know too much. Localization of US manufacturing. So this document is actually from Deloitte, and that's actually an US organization or some company in US. So they are talking about manufacturing in US. Rapid product development and deployment. That's the thing that I discussed. Improving process sustainability, fewer yet greener material, less energy and waste associated with production. Yeah, that's an automatic of good thing about 3D printing. So yeah, so that's all about the video, and this is the web link from where I download this document, and this is the, I mean, the video is based on that document. And yeah, so that's it, and see you in the next week. Bye bye.